Are you?
What do you want to talk about on the podcast this
Oh my
week?
gosh, you give me one. I've got food in my teeth.
So annoying.
That's your last vocabulary word. I have food in my teeth.
Dash, do you think that Mama and Dada have control over you?
No.
Meredith, do Mama and Dada have control over you?
No.
What do you think about control?
I think you are out of control with all of us.
Okay, let's look at the camera.
One more time. Come on. I know it pains you. One more time. Look at me. Go ahead.
I think you're right.
I feel like we should do a little introduction.
All right.
Welcome to the Louisa Show.
As long as you're happy. What kind of introduction would you like to do?
Well, I think we should just talk a little bit about who we are and why we're doing this, what our goal is, which I guess our goals are kind of open, but we just wanted to start a podcast and share a little bit about ourselves, and hopefully help some people along the way.
Yeah, I'm trying to be cool and hip like the young kids. You know, have a podcast,
Yeah, everybody's got a podcast.
right? So, absolutely. I mean, I think both of our stories have compelling and useful aspects to them, but it's also helpful to us to share and be honest. So, hopefully, this can be a inspiration for others to do the same. That would be my hope,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And be rich and famous.
Yes.
After the massive success of our first episode, I was at the daycare this morning, and I felt like Mr. Beast walking around. I was
That's
waiting for somebody to say, "Oh God, he's on YouTube."
Did it happen?
No.
Yeah.
So we're in a new spot today.
Yeah, we're in a new spot. Hopefully, no air conditioning or heat running in the background, or airplanes flying over, cars driving by. Sully may pop back in.
Or a demented 80-year-old lady.
She's
may
not
walk
demented.
around.
Oh my God, John.
She's fine. She's fine.
Are you filming?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I also want to say that we are not doing this. We are both, we have professional jobs, but this is not a avenue for us to provide professional advice, right?
Oh no.
So he's a mental health professional. I can put you to sleep, but safely, and wake you back up. But while we may offer suggestions, they're just based on our own experience and not, I don't know. I just want to put that disclaimer out there. I would say, I hope people can learn something, take something from what we share, but I would, I don't know, it's not gospel what we're saying.
No. I make 80% of what I say up anyways.
Oh my God, that's true. That's true.
I do.
Especially the more and more he says, the like by the third sentence, it's just complete BS.
You'll hold me accountable.
Yeah,
Because you can kind of see through it.
yeah.
So, what did you want to talk about today?
Well, I thought based on, which thank you everybody for watching and for your feedback, those who've reached out. It's really really meaningful. And we had a great night just responding to texts and Facebook messages and stuff. It's really, like I said, meaningful. But I was hoping that, because some people reached out and said, that they had loved ones struggling. And so I thought sometimes with addiction, it's the family members and friends of alcoholics and drug addicts who recognize the problem before the person with the substance use disorder recognizes it. Sometimes they don't ever recognize it, or they recognize it but don't want to do anything about it. So I thought it might be helpful if we shared a little bit about what it was like for us in active addiction, what it was like for our family members, what it looks like, because I think part of what keeps people sick is, in active addiction is family members, friends being afraid of saying the wrong thing or just being in denial. Like, this isn't it.
So when did you realize you had a problem?
I was the last to get the memo.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, in the last year or two of my drinking, my childhood best friend and I had hung out in Atlanta, and I was a complete mess. I don't remember much of the night, but I knew the next morning that I had behaved in a way that was embarrassing. Again, I can't remember what happened that night, but I remember that feeling. I had that feeling a lot of coming to and being like, oh gosh, check my phone. Where am I? Where's my car? And she lives in Atlanta. And when I got back to Augusta, this is probably, I don't know, 2004, 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. In the next week, I think she sent me an email and put me in touch with someone, a friend of hers, who was sober in AA. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what is wrong with her? Like, me?
What did you do?
I don't remember. I don't know that she remembers. I know I didn't follow up on the contact, but
But what did she see in you that she thought you had a problem? Did you get
Oh, I'm sure I was
shit-faced and throw up all over the place? Or?
I don't think I threw up. I wasn't not that I recall, but I was just obnoxious.
Wow.
Obnoxious. Sloppy and obnoxious, usually. We could have Paula on here. She could tell us about
Attest to
it.
your sloppiness.
Yes.
Because you're certainly not sloppy now.
Well, thanks.
I would be the sloppy one.
How about
I'm not that sloppy, though.
he's lying?
I am not. Well, I'm a work in progress.
Let's go. Can we go look at our bathroom sinks and compare?
It's fine. So
How about you? Or are you still asking me questions?
How about me? What? When did I know I had a problem? Oh man, there were a couple of moments. Like I remember. Oh, now the refrigerator's gonna start going.
It's okay. It's okay. We're not perfect. This is us.
So, when I was 17, you've heard this story.
Oh yeah.
I was at a friend's house on the back porch. I was on ecstasy, smoking pot. Was always smoking pot, and of course drinking. We drank Budweiser. I had a bottle of Budweiser. Was smoking pot and was high on ecstasy. And I remember thinking, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. If I could feel like this, why would I not want to feel like this all the time? For me to go back to a state of reality was painful.
Yeah.
Because it was just dull. When you get a taste of that fantasy world, for people like you and me, it becomes painful, I think, to be sober. So that was one time. Now,
but did you recognize this
no.
is going to be a problem?
No. But looking back, I think that was a moment in time where I kind of crossed over the threshold of, it became my number one priority. Because I think it crept in. It slowly seeped into my life to where it became the driving force. Yeah. It wasn't like first time I drank, I was, an alcoholic and couldn't stop.
So can I say something?
Yeah.
That I think that's one thing that is important to point out is the insidiousness of it. It creeps in, but it at least in my experience, it's insidious. It creeps in, but it is progressive.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like putting the frog in a pot of water and slowly turning up the heat, and then all of a sudden
Exactly.
it's boiling.
You're on fire.
So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I remember. I can't remember if it was after I'd been to treatment. I think it was before I went to treatment. I was at UGA, and I was driving in the car with a friend, and I remember saying out loud, "I think I'm a drug addict." That verbatim.
To your friend?
To my friend. Because at this time I was, again, this was after the ecstasy incident at the friend's house.
That was in high school.
That was in high school.
Now you're in college.
Now I'm in college. And at this point, I had developed a dependency on stimulants. So I was abusing stimulants, smoking pot every day, but the drinking was also severe. But I would dabble in things as they kind of came along, but I always like to go fast, and then I like to be put down. So stimulants, and then alcohol and benzos. But I remember saying that. Do you know what my friend said to me?
No, you're not.
No, you're not. Isn't that funny? But I at that point, I think I didn't understand what that meant. I had no frame of reference for what addiction was at that time. But I knew that my addiction, my pill use, my marijuana use, my alcohol use was not normal and was creating a problem. But, your original point was, I think, when did the family, like how could the family start to recognize it?
Yeah.
Because see, I think like my friend, I don't think my family wanted to see it.
The denial.
Yeah, that would have been very painful for them to look at me and say, "Oh, he has a drug problem." I think it's probably easier to say he has a mental health problem, right?
Yeah.
And that's subjective, but I think for a lot of families, and probably my family, it would have been easier to say, "Oh, he's depressed," or "Oh, he's anxious," as opposed to, "Oh, he has an addiction." And I think for them, I think they struggled all the way to the end with not only what to do with me, but like what's really wrong with him.
Yeah.
And I know that's your story too with the eating stuff. Like that there were people in your life who thought it was who thought, "Oh, she's not an alcoholic. She just isn't eating enough. Therefore, she can't handle her liquor."
Yeah. I got overserved a lot.
You did.
That's the term we like to say here in the South. She's overserved.
She's overserved. When did you realize you had a problem?
I think that when I realized that I was an alcoholic, I knew I had problems, but I thought the alcohol was the least of my problem. I didn't think it was a problem at all. I thought in the end, in those last few years, I knew that my drinking didn't look like other people's. I heard someone describe it that way in Boston meetings, and that resonates with me. Like I knew my drinking was different, but I could not fathom a life without alcohol. I didn't want to go anywhere where alcohol wasn't served. It got harder and harder to go anywhere. Like I was thinking about this the other day when I was in nursing school. We had some event at night, like a dinner and a presentation where alcohol was not served, but I had to have some wine before going. It was really hard for me to do things in the evening if I could not drink any kind of activity because it was painful. It was painful may seem like a dramatic word, but I was so anxious and just restless, irritable, and discontented, and the alcohol just quelled all that. But in those last few years, it was very apparent that I was having consequences. I got pulled over for drinking and driving. I got, things were pointed out to me in nursing school. My hands were shaking. I couldn't get the needle to an insulin vial and a skills check off, so I had to repeat it because I needed a drink. My mom was saying stuff, but again, I didn't think I had a problem. I thought, if you had my life too, which looking back on was a pretty good life, but if you had XYZ like I do, you'd drink this way too. And so I thought once I straighten out X, Y, and Z, graduate from nursing school, get the right boyfriend, get the right car, get the right house, then I won't have to drink, and so I didn't realize my life was miserable because of the alcohol. But when I realized that I was an alcoholic and that was what this thing had been inside of me, where I just felt different. It's like I felt uncomfortable in my own skin for years, maybe from childhood. Just felt a little bit different than everybody else. Like I didn't quite fit in, no matter how many peers were around me. I discovered that was alcoholism at Willingway Hospital in Statesboro, Georgia. This is not an advertisement for Willingway. It just happened that's where I got sober in 2007, reading the chapter more about alcoholism in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I read that chapter and I thought, it gives me chills to think about. I thought, oh my gosh, this is what's wrong with me.
Did you read it in the room, in one of your rooms, in the bedroom?
Yeah.
I can picture you sitting in there. I can see the pattern on the bedspread.
But it gave me, it gave me relief, because if you back up a week when I was hospitalized and the physician sat at the foot of my bed and said, "You cannot drink again or you will die," I thought, oh, I'm gonna cuss. Oh shit, I probably said the F word, in my head, because it was like, you can't breathe, you can't use air anymore. That's how it. I couldn't wrap my head around, what that would be like. That sounded horrible.
Mm-hmm.
But then it was, I think, I experienced a lot of wonderful things at Willingway. I got hope back, and but that it was like, in a way, it was very relieving, because I was like, okay, this is what's wrong with me, and clearly some people have found a solution.
Yeah. When you were sharing, I thought about Dr. Fishman.
Yeah.
And the original conversation I had the first time I went to treatment, where I think kind of like with more about alcoholism. So you were kind of identifying with Bill and his story and his concepts around alcoholism and identifying. And it was the same thing for me with Dr. Fishman. Like the way that he talked about things and his experience, I felt I could identify with that. And I think for such an isolating illness, to be able to find connection and to find identification was a powerful thing. Particularly because there's so much shame too. I was so ashamed. I felt like I had disappointed my family. I had lost friends and relationships. I had failed out of school. I had lost jobs. I lost my drivers. I had lost so much. And to hear him talk about it in an honest way, but then to see who was actually sitting in front of me, which was this 24-year sober, healthy, confident, brilliant physician, right? He actually showed me a picture. He literally had a picture in his office of him when he was an anesthesia resident, when he was, diverting, and I was like, oh man, he's telling the truth.
I think, it's interesting how our stories are very different yet so alike, in that, I really tried to keep everything together. I had shame from trying to hold everything together and leading this double life where, I had a job right up until the end, and they had no clue that I went home and drank myself silly in between shifts, So I had shame from, there is just so much shame. That was my point. Anyway.
But you're saying we had things that were alike and things were different. When I was describing, like, my life was totally unmanageable, right? Like,
Mine was too.
I couldn't hold anything together. But yours was more like, I've got to hold it together. I've got to finish school. I've got to work. Is that where you're saying we were different?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you agree?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see that not so much about addiction, but it's about kind of our personalities. Like, in sobriety, you are a very buttoned up, like, hyper achiever, gotta have everything together to a fault.
Thanks.
Right? Right?
Yes, for
You know what I'm
example.
saying? Like,
for example.
no,
wait,
no,
let me
no.
point this out. For example, at the end of the first episode, there was a typo. It said, "There is hope."
Exactly.
That I was like, oh my gosh, that just discredited. He spelled it THEIR, which.
And see, in my mind, that happened for a reason. Maybe that was on purpose. There.
And in my mind, they're
it's
like,
with the people that there's hope. There's
is
there. There is hope. There.
Grammatically, I don't think it works,
Well.
but okay. I mean, but that's how I was raised. I was raised by grammar snobs.
Yeah.
So my grandmother would have been disappointed in that.
But
you're right, I agree.
In sobriety, that has improved dramatically in the sense of, like, when I went to school, I was a very successful student.
Oh yeah.
I was buttoned up. I've had, I go to work, I do what I'm supposed to do. But, like, in a lot of ways, I'm a lot more laissez-faire than you are.
Yeah.
Which I think is actually works well for us. That's a complementary aspect of us, that maybe I encourage you to let loose some, and you encourage me to tighten up some.
To clean your bathroom sink.
Right, or to make the bed. Like, this is embarrassing, okay? But when we started dating, do you remember my bed in Statesboro?
Yeah, I think we should edit this out. Or move on to the question about Remuda.
But this was in recovery, okay? The sheets on that bed.
John, please. You gotta edit this out.
No, but it just didn't occur to me to, like, wash the sheets. Like, I didn't care. It didn't bother me. You, on the other hand, religiously, you wash the sheets every week. That's baffling to me. Like, I admire that. I'm really impressed by that. Because my default, even in recovery, would not be to do that. See, and then you push me to do those things better, right? Like, now I make the bed.
Yeah.
I don't wash the sheets, but
I do.
You do. So I think, does that make sense that we complement each other in that way?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in what ways do I influence you to let go?
Well, sometimes when I'm at my wit's end, I just say, fuck it.
Fuck it. Yeah. That's it. That's what you gotta do. How much of that kind of, like, being buttoned up, wanting to present well, came from, like, society here in Augusta and the pressures that were placed on you to be a certain way, like go to a certain school, be a member of certain groups, right? To look a certain way, right? And then there's a part of you internally that doesn't feel like you fit that, which creates shame, which then perhaps influence the drinking. That may be a bridge too far.
Yeah.
But what, do you not see it that way?
Yeah, I do want to say that I can remember early in sobriety in the halfway house where I was, like, I can hear it being said, like, it doesn't matter how the ass got in the ditch, just get it out, you know? And I do think that sometimes I do think that's really important. And I think that while a lot of things I did experience, and I put a lot of pressure on myself growing up, and I'll answer that question, that I don't believe any of that is why I'm an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is something like the perfect storm of things, nurture and nature, but there's something in me genetically that I, fed the right fertilizer and vodka, and I crossed the line, and now I'm a pickle. And so I can't go back to being a cucumber. And when I put alcohol in my system, something different happens than, somebody who says, God, I can't have more than one glass of wine because I start to feel funny, I love that feeling funny. And I think that's something in me, and that's why I drank. I don't think that these external things that happened in my life are why I drank. But I do think the alcohol, I had a ton of anxiety. I was a very fearful child with very, very much a people pleaser. I heard somebody in Statesboro, my counselor at Willingway said that her first drug of choice was approval, and I get that. In my perception as a child, if you do good things happen, and so I want to do the best. I love good job, Louisa, pats on the back, love making A pluses, don't want to make a 99, I want to make 100. Yes, to a fault. And so, did that. And I don't want to, there were ways I felt different from everybody else in my surroundings as a child.
So you're saying that you feel like it was more nature as opposed to nurture.
I had my first drink at, I think I was 16. And as soon as that, I think it was champagne, hit my system, a flip was switched. A switch was flipped.
I was about to say, I can never get those right.
I know.
It could work both ways.
A flip was switch. No, a switch was flipped.
Yeah, because that's not a
there
flip.
was a flip.
This thing's
Turn
not
the
a
flip
flip.
on.
This is the switch.
Turn the
You
flip
flip
on.
it. Okay. Well, this leads to my question, right? So, not to get into a debate, but it's a question that I don't fully have a grasp of. You're suggesting that the major factor in your development of alcoholism was your genetics, essentially. That you were born with some type of predisposition that when you were exposed to alcohol, flip the switch. Which then leads to the question, okay, well, what, so that would suggest that there are people that don't have the genetic predisposition who drink alcohol and don't have that response, which is 90% of the population, right? Really, 90% of the population can drink safely, right? But can someone that does not have a genetic predisposition develop alcoholism?
I think it's, in part genetic, coupled with nature. Nurture. I do. I think that, but I don't want to blame anybody.
And that's the thing I'm getting at, because I'm suggesting that it's probably, and I don't know, but in my view, it's probably more environmental than you realize. That certainly, and that's not meant to blame. That's to me, that's just about contributing factors. One of the physicians I work with, he does a great talk on the neurobiology of substance use disorder. And he talks about how the brain adapts with addiction and how we all have the same circuitry and the same process when it comes to reward. And he says that addiction is fundamentally it's a feedback loop that starts with the first phase is binge intoxication, right? So I can remember the first time I drank and the first time I felt that intoxication. It was potent and very salient in my mind, as I'm sure it was for you with champagne. Then the next step is negative affect and withdrawal, right? So this is what we were talking about, like you go into this fantasy world, but then you come back to reality. And the negative affect is that feeling of sadness, boredom, guilt, blah, just that negative affect, and then the withdrawal of the reward, which is adverse, right? To withdraw a reward is a negative experience. And then the next is preoccupation, anticipation.
Right.
So this is the obsession.
Right.
And what this physician suggests is that we all have that is present in everything we do.
Right.
Binge intoxication.
But the reward.
The reward, right? Anything that's rewarding. But that with substances that are typically abused, illicit substances, it's a hyperdrive of that process, in that if someone does it enough times, regardless of their genetic predisposition and their family history and all of those things, they will develop addiction, which makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
It makes sense, which is actually counter to, I feel like, some of the things that we learned, which is that, a person has to have a genetic component. And we may not have been taught that explicitly, but like it was hammered in. But I think it makes sense. I think anyone has the capacity, has the propensity to develop an addiction.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. You see people later in life who they have some sort of usually triggering nature component,
Yeah.
nurture component, like some sort of traumatic event, a divorce, the death of a child, the death of a spouse, some sort of, precipitating event that leads them to start drinking more.
Yeah.
I've heard that. I was in treatment with a woman when I got sober, who that was her story. So sure, like in her 60s, that's when she started drinking.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess, I don't know. I guess I don't think about, the why and my drinking a lot. I think about, the why and how my isms express themselves today. Why am I, when I'm struggling with control, when I'm, when I'm struggling today with all these wonderful things that have come into my life as a result of being sober, what makes me tick today? How has that shaped who I am today? And how can looking at all that help me better navigate? But I don't a lot of times think, why am I an alcoholic? Because I don't think it matters.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. I think it matters. I think it matters as we, for people in the treatment world and a lot of people want to know why. But I don't have that answer. I mean, maybe a lot of research is going to answer that one day, but I think the why does matter in the world, the treatment world, as a means of prevention in the future, hopefully. Prevention and mitigation, But I think that it doesn't, for me at least at this point, it doesn't bring me any peace. But I don't have this need to know why.
I just want to hear these magic words.
You're right.
You're right. I'll give you an example. So, for a long time, my addiction was just a very, very painful, destructive, shameful force in my life. Right? Coming into recovery and changing our lives, we have as a result changed our relationship to addiction.
Absolutely.
Which has made all the difference in the world. In fact, it's made it an asset to us. Arguably the greatest asset we have.
Yeah.
So it went from being our greatest liability to being our greatest asset because we changed our relationship to it. So what I'm saying is that perhaps understanding can facilitate us changing our relationship to something.
I get that.
It's
You're
brilliant.
right.
It
It's
is
brilliant.
You
No.
should put that in a
I
book.
think it probably already is in a book.
I know. I just made it up. I just make this shit up. It's just unbelievable. But no, it's true. And the reason I'm passionate about this is actually because of a conversation I had today, talking about this. Because you're right. We were, I think, and it was appropriate at the time. We were early in recovery. The focus wasn't on understanding the past, because I think the tendency would have been to place blame.
Right.
At that point in my life, had I said, oh, I'm an alcoholic because my father was mean, well, then it's not my fault. And the logical next step to that is, well, if my father's mean and I get rid of my father, then I can drink.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it was absolutely appropriate at that point to say, let's focus on getting the jackass out of the ditch instead of why he got in the ditch.
Right.
But I guess what I'm saying is, at some point, I think there's tremendous value in learning how the jackass got in the ditch.
Yeah, I agree. It's like triage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Our ditches were pretty deep
they were pretty deep and dirty
and dirty.
and filled with dirty sheets.
Yours were, mine were clean.
My sheets were filthy. Hey, it's the truth. We're here to be vulnerable and real.
That's disgusting. That's
Well,
not vulnerable.
hey,
Our sheets are clean, okay?